right, so let's talk about working on project teams. Another thing I'm sure that you're all either experiencing or you will experience as consultants. So we know that the goal of any engagement is to deliver high quality work on time and on budget. The collective education, knowledge, experiences of your team can help to achieve this goal. So when you get assigned to a project team, realize that your teammates all come to the table with different educations, different areas of expertise, different degrees of experience, and different projects they've worked on. And we found that the most successful project-oriented PSOs are really good about leveraging the intellectual capabilities and the combined experiences of their team. So understand these things we all bring to the table and leverage them. And so what do we need to do to work well as part of a project team? We think of 6 things. First, teamwork. We got to make sure we're sharing knowledge with others, seeking opportunities to solicit input, feedback, or ideas from others, and expecting and encouraging others to critique our work. So let's make sure we're okay with asking for others to give us a critical eye toward how we do things to help us get better and help serve our teams better. The next thing is interpersonal. Let's make sure we're accepting and utilizing that constructive feedback. And let's be enthusiastic. Remember, enthusiasm can be contagious. And so let's make sure we're not a toxic teammate. Let's make sure we're the positive and optimistic ones and help bring our team up. And let's be inspirational, having that positive and can-do attitude approach to problem solving. Initiative. Let's make sure we prepare for our assignment, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Let's be willing to work outside of our comfort zone. It's okay to ask for help. So it's okay to, raise our hand and say, I'm not real comfortable with that, but I'll take it on to make sure it gets done. And then I can ask for help and, get others to help me along the way. And then problem solving, making sure we back up our opinions with facts and engage in discussion. And then make sure we follow up. Don't leave someone waiting for us. Make sure that we're following up and getting things done. And if we're not the one to get it done, make sure we've handed it off and followed up to make sure they've got something done for the client. Time management. Let's make sure we commit enough time for every task. Don't underestimate how long it's going to take to get something done. Let's create a master schedule and a master to-do list for ourselves. And let's consistently prioritize and identify and communicate conflicts in advance. So as we have this to-do list or this tick list of items we need to get done, let's make sure we're constantly prioritizing those and making sure that we have the right priorities in place and communicate any conflicts that may come up as a result. Let's be a team player. Let's recognize that other teammates' deliverables may depend on our work. We're working to get these tasks done, and there's a dependency there. So let's make sure that we're cognizant of that and making sure that we're getting things done timely so that our teammates aren't waiting for us. And let's make sure we're providing regular progress or status reports to our project leads or our teammates so they know where we're at. And then let's make sure we communicate. Let's make sure we let stakeholders know when they can expect us to be available or unavailable and how they can reach us. Let's return calls or emails within 24 hours. We've talked about this a little bit already. Even if it's just to say, hey, I got your email or I got your phone call, I'll get back to you, tomorrow. And then when customer A calls and we're with customer B, let's acknowledge the call and see if we can schedule another time to talk via email or IM if it's possible. Or we can delegate. Can we delegate that to a teammate to reach out to the customer and make sure that they get them taken care of? Or if we need to, let's politely excuse ourselves from customer B and go find a private space to have our scheduled call with customer A. So what are some examples, if we step back and think for a minute, about teams that have worked together really well? Who are some teams that you've worked on or worked with or observed that have worked together well? What do you think made them work together well? And then, conversely, what are some examples of teams that you've been on or you've witnessed that have not worked together well? And what do you think caused this? My guess is teams that you witnessed work together well didn't have what we like to call the "it's not my job" syndrome. And so there's a good visual right there on the left side of the screen. They paved right around a car that was parked on the street, and so they say, hey, it's not my job to remove the car. It's my job to pave the street. Well, that's a poor kind of attitude or approach to have as we think about working in teams. Let me give you a situation here. So an average consumer walks into a hardware store, and after searching fruitlessly for a particular drill bit, the customer spots a store employee. And so he asks the employee, hey, where are the drill bits? Which response from the hardware store employee is likely more beneficial? if they say, hey, it's over in aisle 12, or hey, it's in aisle 12 and let me take you there and help. So naturally, the second response is probably the more appropriate and better response. So I can think about being in hardware stores, like going to Lowe's, Home Depot. Sometimes you don't even know where aisle 12 is, or you can't tell which side is aisle 12, and then you don't know. Is it on the left side of the aisle? Is it on the right side of the aisle? Is it up high, down low? So you're still searching potentially fruitlessly for that drill bit in this case. But if the hardware store employee goes above and beyond and walks you there, one, they're going to help you get the drill bit, but two, they may be able to help you get, whatever else you may need for that particular project. And so, something to think about as we think about consulting world, how can we kind of go above and beyond to make sure we're not just answering the question for our customer, but also helping them along the way. So along with the It's Not My Job award, here's some additional things that we should avoid. Let's make sure we're not the know-it-all. Don't be the know-it-all. Don't just have an answer for everything. Sometimes it's okay, even if you do have an answer, to sit back and just listen and maybe let somebody else have the solution or answer in that case. But let's not be known as the know-it-all. And that gives a bad taste in the customer's mouth and taking advice from you. Don't be afraid of not having the answer. It's okay to not have the answer. Maybe think about how I'm going to respond in that situation if I don't have the answer. It's okay to say, you know what, I'm not real sure about that. Let me go check with some colleagues and I'll make sure I follow up with you. And then don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to look around internally and identify subject matter experts or people who've been there and done that and ask them for help. Let's make sure we don't chuck it over the wall. So if we've got, an issue, or if we've got, maybe we're working in an environment where there's a support team, and a customer calls in and we say, that's really not, my area of expertise. But let's make sure we don't just throw it over to the other team and say, hey, so-and-so called in about this, go call them. Let's make sure we have a formal handoff to say, hey, I talked to Jill at this client site and she said this was going on for them. Can you look into that for them and make sure you get buy-in from whoever you're handing off to, and then communicate back to Jill and say, hey, I've handed this off. They're going to reach out to you by the end of the day. And then let's make sure we follow up and make sure that does happen. And then last here, don't be afraid of not knowing how to respond. It's okay if you don't know how to respond, if you don't have the answer. Think through some ways that you can respond in those situations and say, I'm not real sure how to do that. Or if you don't maybe want to admit you're not sure, if you say, hey, you know what, that's a good topic.